So module one, I've reacquainted my love affair with Keynote, of course, because Google is something I'm trying to avoid throughout this course. You can download this Keynote, and if you want to drop down on the thumbnails to the left-hand side of the Keynote, you can actually access the module one slides from last week. Those are there, but I'm skipping right over them this week. So some reflections. First of all, we had two blog posts this week, significant ones actually, because they dealt firstly with school change and leadership, and second of all with technology planning. And there were some great articles in there, and there was some great content to engage with. And I've selected material that I think is close to our context. We had our own Mike Pelletier, and we've had Dion Norman from Canadian International School. So these are people that are in our backyard and in our environment. So hence those materials were chosen. I'm really pleased with what I saw come out of it. Some great ideas did emerge. One of them, of course, was talking about the team and getting the team right as almost like a precursor of any form of technology change or initiative or implementation. It's really about getting the personnel on the deck to begin with. That flows through to professional learning, and some of you talked more extensively actually about your own professional learning needs and your thoughts around the needs in terms of professional learning to drive forward and make success of any form of implementation or initiative. And there was also discussion about pedagogy. And so, and we saw some direct connections being made. And Jared made the comment in his blog post. If you haven't read it yet, it's a good one. He opens up by saying change is a constant in education, which of course it is. And he goes on to talk about, we began, and I'll quote from his post because I think he's going to say it better than I'm able to paraphrase it. He said, "We began by defining our common mission and vision, allowing us to commit together to the change. As a result of the change, we became more unified in our department and realised our strengths. We learned to compromise and advocate for what we believed was important, and our program became much more aligned and effective." And it connects to something Kelly said in her blog post too, and she's talked about, defining what quality, productive and successful collaboration looks like, sounds like and feels like with my teams. So this idea around collaboration, commented on by two, but more of our cohort this week, is precisely the sort of direction I think we need to take, because the technology alone, as many of you have observed, is just not enough. The plan itself is not enough, but getting people on board and people understanding the why and connecting people with their ideas is a critical precursor to certainly to school change and central to any technology planning. And Chris talked about, the importance of making sure that teachers are not only provided resources to be successful, but also the theoretical understanding of the initiative. This is really around, talking about getting people on board. Again, it's a concern for people, and it connects, I suppose, to my sharing of the Steve Jobs quote last week, which was that, really technology on its own is not going to achieve anything. And we've had Simon this week, talking about, wanting to take and I think really trying to grapple with the idea of, what is the role of technology in the elementary school music department. It talks about data, it talks about SMART goals, it talks about how it's influenced the PLC, how he has been at the forefront of trying to initiate some small changes in technology, but not really sure where to go next. But expressing the desire to take a more active role in instigating the change. This feeding through into his personal inquiry. So we're starting to see some of those connections between what he's blogging, what he's sharing in a more extended format via the blog, but also with his inquiry, which is on the updates page. Really encourage you to take a look at what Simon is putting out at the moment, because it's great material. And then we've had Sean, and Sean's talked about about being a third year teacher of 3 years experience and really wanting to just dive in and try everything. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I think for me, I share some of that sentiment. I share some of that recollection from when I started teaching. I think some of my most innovative teaching was done in my first 3 years because I was just diving in and jumping in and trying absolutely everything. After you've done it a few times, you start to realise that not everything was as successful as what I might have assumed. And student engagement doesn't necessarily mean successful student learning outcomes either. And I think Sean is observing that in his post and talking about really needing to and reflecting also what Dion Norman said in the podcast, which is the challenging thing is to have a discussion with teachers about the need to plan around the curriculum standards. It's not the most compelling conversation to have, but it's an important one, and Sean observes that in his blog posts and talks about planning around that. And so it's a maturing of a professional in many ways. Great post, Sean. And Julie has hidden a little gem in the bottom of her school change post, which is she's got a blog and she shares it with her Chinese students, and it's an amazing resource. She's producing a lot of content that goes on that blog, and so I had fun looking at that one. So as well as it being a great post that really did hit upon many of the themes, especially around professional learning, and also just a reaching out. Reflected in her comments in the discussion as well. What tools should I be using? How do I engage? How do I engage my kids? And what really is the role of technology for my students? So I saw those threads coming through in each time she was active this week. Saw it. So great start this week in terms of blog posting. The next step is really for you to be connecting to each other's blogs and getting out of it what I certainly feel like I got out of it this week. Fantastic reading. Kelly produced this great graphic which she produced around leading change, and I think it's a really nice little summary, and it ties in. This is published on her blog post for this week, blog post number 1, and it summarises some of the theory put by Dr. Douglas Reeves, and so that's a really good article to have a look at. And I saw that I think one of Kelly's discussion post this week, where she really flipped the conversation from talking about integration to talking about implementation from a more administrative or leadership type perspectives, and that sparked a lot of interest and a lot of comments, and many of you got a lot out of that particular thread. I think there were around 9 discussion posts around that initial statement opened up by Kelly, and prior to that, Sean. So. We saw 2 of the really big themes coming through, and that post. Discussion number 1: implementation in your context. I want to share with you a couple of significant posts that I thought helped to sort of drive the conversation, or in the first case by James, really summed up the conversation that sort of began very early with the post made by Kelly, and then 8 others afterwards. Looking really for the secrets to successful implementation of technology in classrooms. So therefore integration. And James sort of sums it up by saying technology and implementation and tech integration are 2 sides of the same tech coin. And so I think that was really, James came in late into the discussion but summarised it really well in that one sentence. So hence I've chosen to share that first. Julie talks about professional development and the opportunities, the in-house opportunities as well for professional learning within our school. And so and also she's involved in a very interesting project, as some of you might know, in that she will be one of the first Chinese immersion teachers in the kindergarten next year. So I think that's a daunting task for anybody, but and hence some of that comes through. So Julie's post Julie's contribution to the discussion's a good one, and we've got Kelly's post, as I said, which changed the direction early in the discussion in a really productive way, because it really brought the discussion into it being more about context and our personal context right now, and so that was a really valuable contribution. And Sally talked about the different players and the different roles and the different hats that people wear whenever we're talking about implementation of anything. She talks about the early adopters and the innovators and the early majority and the late majority and the laggards, and perhaps brings more of an administrative perspective to that discussion. What I'm looking for in future discussion. So this discussion was a rich one. So But what I'm looking for as we move forward is I'm really looking for more emphasis to be placed on what is the student's role in implementation. Is implementation really what we do or what we perform or the way that we collaborate? Is it just that? What of the student? What are we really asking the students to take on when we talk about their role in implementation? That we'd agree now, and hopefully you heard this through the podcast and other materials you've been engaging with, is that students are certainly not expected, if we to be successful, any form of passive sort of role. They play a very active role. So maybe this is really a thought, food for thought, for you to take forward into future discussions and your blog posts and even your personal inquiries, to think carefully about, well, what am I really asking the students to take on in terms of their role in any successful implementation? So then we come to our personal inquiry. So it starts with a question or a statement of a problem or a challenge. And not, like I said earlier, not everybody has posted this yet. And that's fine. There's no specific deadline placed on it. But certainly I'll be looking for that by the end of this week, for everyone to have identified how they intend to make this course meaningful to them in their context as they move forward. One of the prompts I gave last week was to think about, well, what is your future career? Maybe that is a way of looking, maybe that's the lens you want to adopt to look at this personal inquiry piece. Or maybe it's the challenges you've faced in the last year, 2, 3 years at SAS. Or maybe it's the type of role you're even transitioning into, or the type of role you want to play within the team as you move forward in your planning for 2017-18. What I'm really looking for you to start talking about as well in your personal inquiry as we move towards the end of Module 2, you are going to write a blog post to finish this module off, is to start talking in some detail about the different strategies and rationale for what it is you intend to do, what action you intend to take around your personal inquiry. I think in the initial stages, we want to be talking about, well, what is it we want to do? What is it we're interested in? Let's now start to move into strategies and rationale. And so these are some of the personal inquiry questions being posed. These are not the only. There's not the only content that's being posted around this topic on the updates page in Schoology, but these ask very direct questions, and so these lend themselves, I think, most ideally to that next stage of starting to look at strategies and starting to look at rationale. Because, yeah, exactly, Simon, how do you integrate technology more seamlessly without it feeling like a total shift in instruction for students? What really is the role of technology? And we saw that in his blog post as well. What are the best practices? So this will be an interesting one for Simon and for Chris. You know, how do we get the most out of a one-to-one program in the middle school? And how do we create, you know, more collaboration and self-actualization for kids and adults, as inquired by